Hi, team. I hope that you guys are all having a good day and that you had a good weekend. Sorry I can't be in class today, but I hope that this video is helpful for you for guiding you through the 3 different assignments that you're going to be completing today. This video, you're only going to be completing 1 assignment, and I want to explain to you the background of the text that we're going to read. So we're going to be reading an excerpt from an essay from this book by Toni Morrison called The Origin of Others. This is a compilation of essays and then also transcripts of speeches that she gave about this idea of narrating the voice of the quote unquote other. And for her as a Black writer, she had this understanding of the way that Black authors were othered by the dominant publishing society. And so she wanted to push back against that narrative. And so she wanted to also explain that even though there has been this very strategic process of othering people throughout literature, throughout media, throughout all forms of life, that if we look closely enough, if we ask the questions that we need to ask, we will find out that there is plenty of humanity that connects us to the other. And that's what she aims to do in explaining this, the origin of others, and then also how to narrate that too. So a little bit more background is that before she wrote the book Beloved, when she made this book, The Black Book, which is a compilation of primary source documents that she found as an editor and that she put together in a book. So like from the beginning of printing in America through the early 1900s, there's maps, there's photographs, there's excerpts from magazines and newspapers, transcripts of conversations, there are letters, there are tax records, there are records of sale of slaves as well, all sorts of documents. And the purpose of her putting in the documents and not providing any sort of evidence was that she wanted to be able to show the impact that African Americans have had on American history, and then also the way that African Americans have been treated in different forms of media and in different ways, and also written about from the start of the United States, the very beginning. When she was putting together the Black Book, she came across this article of this woman, or about this woman named Margaret Garner, who was a slave who escaped from Kentucky, went to Ohio. Her slave catchers went to Ohio to bring her back to Kentucky. And in that process, she made the decision to kill her children, or attempt to kill her children, in order to save them from slavery. And so it was a very controversial case. Like, you can go on the New York Times website and find the original court reportings from that case. And it was very controversial because at the time, abolitionist groups, so people who were against slavery, they actually wanted her to be tried for murder for her child, because that would then prove that she was a human operating from her own like free will or agency. But instead, she was not tried for murder. She was actually tried for stolen property. So Margaret Garner became it was like the little drop of inspiration for the book Beloved. And Toni Morrison is going to talk about how she took something that's very controversial, very painful from real life, and she's going to talk about the imagination that was involved in order to turn it into a fiction book. So even though the book is fiction, it's based on this very real person. But the events in the book are all Toni Morrison and all of her brilliance. All right, so I'm going to share my screen with y'all. I tried to find a tool that would allow me to be able to do that, like speak, and while I speak, it would highlight the text for you as you follow along. I couldn't find it, and so this is the best compromise that I could do. I tried to make the share screen a little smaller so that you can follow along with the text that is currently featured on the screen as I read it to you. And because this is being turned into an ed puzzle, you're going to be stopped a couple of times throughout the reading of this excerpt of the essay, and you're going to be asked to answer some questions. All right, let's do this. Okay. An excerpt from The Origin of Others, Narrating the Other by Toni Morrison. Among the material I collected was a newspaper clipping with the intriguing headline, "A Visit to the Slave Mother Who Killed Her Child." It was published in the February 12, 1856 issue of the American Baptist by Reverend P.S. Bassett, from the Fairmont Theological Seminary in Cincinnati, Ohio, who made it his duty to worship with prisoners. Margaret Garner, the slave mother, and members of her family had fled Kentucky, where they were enslaved, for the free state of Ohio. Bassett's encounter with Margaret Garner reads, "Last Sabbath, after preaching in the city prison, Cincinnati, through the kindness of the deputy sheriff, I was permitted to visit the apartment of that unfortunate woman, concerning whom there has been so much excitement during the last 2 weeks. I found her with an infant in her arms only a few months old, and observed that it had a large bruise on its forehead. I inquired the cause of injury. She then proceeded to give a detailed account of her attempt to kill her children. She said that when the officers and slave hunters came to the house in which they were concealed, she caught a shovel and struck 2 of her children in the head, and then took a knife and cut the throat of the third, and tried to kill the other. That if they had given her time, she would have killed them all. That with regard to herself, she cared but little. She was unwilling to have her children suffer as she had done. I inquired if she was not excited almost to madness when she committed the act. No, she replied, I was as cool as I am now, and would much rather kill them at once, and thus end their sufferings, than have them taken back to slavery and be murdered by piecemeal. She then told the story of her wrongs. She spoke of her days of suffering, of her nights of unmitigated toil, while the bitter tears coursed their way down her cheeks and fell on the face of the innocent child as it looked up smiling, little conscious of the danger and probable sufferings that awaited it. As I listened to the facts and witnessed the agony depicted in her countenance, I could not but exclaim, oh, how terrible is irresponsible power when exercised over intelligent beings. She alludes to the child that she killed as being free from all trouble and sorrow with a degree of satisfaction that almost chills the blood in one's vein. Yet she evidently possesses all the passionate tenderness of a mother's love. She is about 25 years of age and apparently possesses an average amount of kindness with a vigorous intellect and much energy of character. The 2 men and the 2 other children were in another apartment, but her mother-in-law was in the same room. The mother-in-law says she is the mother of 8 children, most of whom have been separated from her, that her husband was once separated from her 25 years, during which time she did not see him, that could she have prevented it, would never have permitted him to return, as she did not wish him to witness her sufferings or be exposed to the brutal treatment that he would receive. She states that she has been a faithful servant, and in her old age, she would not have attempted to obtain her liberty, but as she became feeble and less capable of performing labor, her master became more and more exacting and brutal in his treatments until she could stand it no longer. That the effort could only result in death at most, and therefore she made the attempt. And Vaughn's side note, that means that she made the attempt to run away. She witnessed the killing of the child, but said she neither encouraged nor discouraged her daughter-in-law. For under similar circumstances, she probably would have done the same. The old woman is from 60 to 70 years of age, has been a professor of religion about 20 years, and speaks with much feelings of the time when she shall be delivered from the power of the oppressor and dwell with the Savior, where the wicked cease from trembling and the weary are at rest. These slaves, as far as I am informed, have resided all their lives within 16 miles of Cincinnati. We are frequently told that Kentucky slavery is very innocent. If these are its fruits, where it exists in a mild form, will someone tell us what we may expect from its more objectionable features? But comments are unnecessary. The observations in that article that called my attention were: 1, the mother-in-law's inability to condemn or approve the infanticide, and 2, Margaret Garner's serenity. As some of my readers know, Margaret Garner's story was the genesis for my novel, Beloved. Some 10 years ago, the publication of the novel, a biography of the historical Margaret Garner, was published. Its title is Modern Medea, a family story of slavery and child murder from the Old South by Stephen Weisenberger. While the reference in Mr. Weisenberger's book is to the classical story of a spurned woman who killed her children as an act of vengeance against their unfaithful father, my narrative is about the understandable versus the safe act of child murder. Weisenberger's biography is a thorough examination of the facts surrounding Margaret Garner's actions and their consequences, facts I knew little to nothing of and which I deliberately chose not to investigate, even if I had had the opportunity, which I didn't. I wanted to rely fully on my own imagination. My principal interest was in trying to fathom the mother-in-law's inability to condemn her daughter-in-law for murder. Wondering what her answer might finally be, I decided that the only one with the unquestionable right to judge was the dead child herself, whom I named the one word her mother could have afforded to have inscribed on her tombstone: beloved. Of course, I changed names, created characters, eliminated characters, and shrunk others. For example, Margaret Garner's husband, Robert, and I ignored the trial completely, which was months long, controversial, and roiled abolitionists, who turned Garner into a cause célèbre as they tried to get her charged with murder in an effort to overturn the Fugitive Slave Law of 1850. I gave her one surviving child, the birth of whom was aided by a white girl, a runaway slave herself, whose sympathy was based on gender, not race. I saw Setha, the name I gave the mother, escaping alone. I inserted a speaking, thinking dead child whose impact and appearance and disappearance could operate as slavery's Gothic damage. The outcome of the trial I knew. The slave mother was in effect judged to have no legal responsibility for the killing of her child. If found responsible, she would have been condemned to death, as a federal district court judge stepped in to rule that the Fugitive Slave Act must take precedence. Margaret Garner was therefore, under the law, a piece of property, as were her offspring, who no way belonged to her, because they were stock that could be, and regularly were, sold. Which is to say, Garner was finally judged not human with human responsibilities, such as motherhood, but as an animal to be sold like cattle. In any case, she was doomed to early death as a killer or slow death as a brutalized slave. In face, as Mr. Weisenberger discovered, she was sent south again and lived as a slave until she died of typhoid in 1858. Compelling as the real Margaret Garner story is, the novel's center and spread are the murdered child. Imagining her was for me the soul of art in its bones. Narrative fiction provides a controlled wilderness, an opportunity to be and to become the other, the stranger, with sympathy, clarity, and risk of self-examination. In this interaction, for me, the author, beloved the girl, the haunter, is the ultimate other, clamoring forever, clamoring for a kiss.